and we had a huge fight. It started as a discussion, and the discussion was, she said, "I'm afraid," and I looked at her and I said, "You're a drug addict, and you're a drunk, and you're worthless." And all she was looking for was some help, and she came back at me and told me what was going on in my life. And before we got done, I was standing there with my hands digging into her shoulder. And this is not something I had been raised to do. I'd not been raised to be violent. And I was staring her in the eyes, and I was threatening to kill her. And she wanted me out. And every bit of rage that I had felt with my wife throwing me out and losing my children and what God had done to my son, and all the just absolute rage took over. And I remember throwing her into the wall and storming out of there.
This is The Bottom Line. I'm Gary Thiemann in Los Angeles. Sometimes the alcoholic is the last person to know he's an alcoholic. Denial is so prevalent. Fred's story. Kind enough to share the wreckage of his past, along with the hope for his future.
My name's Fred, and I'm an alcoholic. I was born in Los Angeles in 1947 and raised in Ohio, right up just outside of Cleveland. And I had a very good time as a young fella back there. I had parents, actually, who did a real good job with me. Sometimes I sit back and wonder what more they could have given me, and sometimes I don't. But I had a good childhood, as far as my parents were concerned. The problem I ran into was at a very, very early age. I felt different, and what I really noticed was that I didn't feel like I belonged with the people around me. Fortunately, I have a brother who's about 9 years older than I am, and he and I were very close, and he exposed me to a lot of good things. My dad and my brother were both very, very into music, and I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music as a youngster. And a good thing for a kid who likes being alone is I like playing music and I like practicing, and nobody ever bothered me about that. I could spend hours and hours by myself practicing, and people would just say, "Oh, well, Fred's practicing." The two things I enjoyed, one was playing music, and the other was not having to put up with the other kids. When I was about 10 years old, I was given a lot of freedom to spend time with my brother. And we went to a lot of concerts and a lot of museums, and I got to hang around with his friends, who were all, by this time, around 20, and I was around 10. And I also was exposed to marijuana and funny little pills and things like that, and beer. And what was interesting for me was I really didn't care for it at the time. It was not a big deal for me. In fact, I got all the way through high school, and I remember my first drunk. Oh my God, I remember my first drunk on Southern Comfort in the back seat of a 1950 Ford Executive Coupe. That's one of those where the back seat was a board. And I remember going out with a couple buddies of mine, and they didn't want to drink. I think maybe they had a beer or two, and I went out and got a half pint of Southern Comfort, and I'd never had this stuff before. And boy, I'll tell you, I was sick. But I had a good time. But I also said, well, I better not do this too often. So at that point, I really had a fair amount of respect for what alcohol could do to me, and I did not drink a whole lot. In fact, my serious drinking really didn't begin until I got to be about age 21. And 21 was a good year for me. 21 was a very good year. I had been very shy, I guess, because of this withdrawn feeling. And at 21, all of a sudden, I found myself dating 3 women at the same time. And this was just something I hadn't experienced before. I had been going with one girl for a couple of years, and that was fun. But I found myself with 3 different girls, and it was terrific. One was tall, one was medium, one was short, one was a blonde, one was a brunette, and one was a redhead. One was quite middle class, one was an aspiring starlet and absolutely beautiful, and the other was a hippie. And so I had 3 different women, 3 different looks, 3 different lifestyles, and I had a good time with all of them. And somehow I should have known there was a problem, because instead of just saying to myself, well, I should enjoy this part of my life right now, I figured, well, I'm going with 3 girls at the same time. There's only one thing I can do that's reasonable here. I better marry one of them. And 2 things I'd always told myself. One is I'd never own a 55 Chevy, and 2 is I'd never get involved with a redhead. My second car was a 55 Chevy, and my first wife was a redhead. And we were married. I was just turned 22. She was 19. And I was introduced to social drinking in a big way. We had some friends of ours, some neighbors in the apartment building we were in, whose parents had come down to spend the summer, and they were staying in a motorhome. And we all got to be very, very good friends and did a lot of drinking. And as a going-away present, our friend's father gave my wife and myself a fully stocked bar. And I started learning the fine art of drinking. And I drank socially. I drank a lot. I drank every day after work and drank into the evening. My life was revolving around alcohol, and I was having a very good time. A very good time. Things were going well. I was getting paid well. My wife seemed to love me. I had good friends. I was enjoying all of the good things that alcohol should do for people. And one of the wise decisions my wife and I made was we did not want children right away. So we waited about 4 years. And my son was born, beautiful son, Daniel. And it took me quite a while to feel attached to him. I found being a father was not something that came easy for me. It took about a year. And at about a year, I fell in love with my boy. At about 8 or 9 months old, we noticed he wasn't walking very much at all, and he seemed to need to hold himself a lot. And his strength didn't seem right, and we didn't think a whole lot of it, and we took him to the pediatrician, and the pediatrician said, don't worry, basically, by the time he gets married, he'll be walking, and didn't play it up very much. And at about 14 or 15 months, he'd walk a little bit and tended to fall down some. To make a rather complicated story not so complicated, a month before Daniel's 3rd birthday, my wife had taken him to the doctor while I was at work because something was just wrong. He'd walk, but he fell down. And I came home from work that afternoon, and she came home about 10 minutes later from the doctor's with our son, and she mentioned to me that, I said, well, what's going on with the doctor? And she said, well, Daniel has muscular dystrophy. And she seemed to take it very much in stride, and the only thing I could think of is, my God, that's the Jerry Lewis disease. And I called the doctor immediately, and we went back in, and he said that he was 95% certain that Daniel had muscular dystrophy, but some further tests should be done by experts. And over the next month or so, it was confirmed that he had muscular dystrophy, the most severe form of it, and we were told that if he was lucky, he may live to his early teens. From the date of the official diagnosis, I sent into a path of drinking nightly, and then perhaps at lunch I'd have a few drinks, and then perhaps right after work I'd have a few drinks. And I remember I'd get up in the morning crying, and I'd go in and shave and shower and try to get my face cleared up from the tears. And I remember feeling sick in my gut, and I'd try to get myself together so I could go in and say good morning to my son, and good morning to our daughter also. And I'd put on a happy face, and I'd go to work, and I'd cry in the car between leaving the home and the office. And I'd sit in the car and maybe take a couple of swallows of some Seagrams that I had under the front seat. And then I'd straighten up my face again and go into the office and do what I had to do there and get in the car and cry on my way to the first call. And maybe have a couple of drinks. And go and straighten myself up for the first call and continue that for the rest of the day. And at night I'd get home with a happy face on and tuck the kids into bed about 7:45, say goodnight to my wife, and I was off at the bar. And that's how my life was. I did not understand what was happening to me. You know, I figured any man in my situation would be doing the things that I'm doing. I mean, how else do you survive without drinking? And it went like that for a couple of years. And at this bar, of course, I met the woman who understood me. And I had been married at this point about 9 years, had been faithful to my wife. And now it's 9 years, and I needn't bore you with the details, but it was perfect. I'd go to the bar at 8 o'clock, and I'd get home at 4:30 in the morning, which is interesting because in California the bars close at 1:45 bar time, as many of you might know. And my wife stopped asking me. She just stopped asking me. One day, one morning I got home about 3 or 4. It was a Friday night. And I decided to get the passbook to the savings account because I wanted to get a little money out for the weekend. And I took out the passbook, and the passbook said 0. And I didn't understand. And I went over and I found another bank book, and it said balance 0. And I checked out some other investments that we had, and everything was gone. And I went into the bedroom and woke up my wife, and for the first time in about 3 years we talked. And she said she'd moved everything out of her name and she wanted me out. And I didn't know anything had been wrong. You know, I had just been maintaining. But she wanted me out. And we had a very difficult divorce because we had 2 children. And very difficult. We couldn't talk for about the first year. The only time we actually spoke for about a year was at the actual court appearance, and we both cried a lot. And then we went out and sat and had drinks, and we didn't see each other again for quite a while. I ended up moving away. I could not stand the idea of being in that area anymore. I moved down to the beach area. I was going to stay at my mother's house for about a week until I could find an apartment. Unfortunately, I was drinking from 10 o'clock into the morning until 10 o'clock at night regularly, and then 11 o'clock, and then 12 o'clock, and then all night. And that's what I did, and I ended up sleeping on her sofa or whatever sofa I could find for about a year. I found a bar that played the music that I used to very much enjoy, and I spent most of my time there. And they served beer and wine. And I didn't care for beer and wine. I liked bourbon. Fortunately, there was a bar across the street, so between the two I did just fine. Oddly enough, I met a fellow there who we had known each other as teenagers. By this time I was 33 years old. And we had met when I was 16 and he was 13, and we couldn't stand each other as teenagers. But we met at this bar and recognized each other, and we ended up being best of buddies. And he drank as much as I drank, and he took as many pills as I did, and he smoked as much marijuana as I did, and we were real good buddies. And that was the only time I ever had a drinking buddy, and my life turned to hell. And I thought it had been bad, and it was getting worse by the day. I wanted to kill myself. I was afraid to do that. I was hurting bad. Found one of the waitresses at this restaurant, or the bar that we were at. She was quite young, and she liked partying, and she and I got together, and we ended up living together for almost a year. And I started playing music again professionally. And I finally had a job that paid well, and I went out of town for a few days. And when I came back, she had told me that she had done some quaaludes, and apparently decided to service most of the men in the neighborhood over the weekend, and she was afraid of losing me. And I was afraid of losing her, and being honest about it, I probably was afraid of losing the place I was staying at. And we had a huge fight. It started as a discussion, and the discussion was, she said, "I'm afraid." And I looked at her and I said, "You're a drug addict, and you're a drunk, and you're worthless." And all she was looking for was some help. And she came back at me and told me what was going on in my life. And before we got done, I was standing there with my hands digging into her shoulder. And this is not something I had been raised to do. I'd not been raised to be violent. And I was staring her in the eyes, and I was threatening to kill her. And she wanted me out. And every bit of rage that I had felt with my wife throwing me out and losing my children and what God had done to my son, and all the just absolute rage took over. And I remember throwing her into the wall and storming out of there. And this was on a Monday night. And I remember the first place I went was to the bar, not the beer and wine bar, the hard liquor bar. And I remember sitting down there and ordering a double. And fortunately, the bartender there knew me well enough that he didn't have to wait for me to ask for it. He just poured me a double. And I got drunker and drunker and drunker.
Someone at the bar planted a seed for Fred, a seed that would grow into recovery through the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. AA, a blueprint plan that Fred lives one day at a time.
I don't remember the next day at all. It was complete blackout. But the following day, Patrick took me to a meeting at a clubhouse in Manhattan Beach. And I was not there to get sober. All I knew was I couldn't be alone anymore. And in this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was at the clubhouse there, people sat in a circle I'd say there were about 25 people sitting in chairs in a circle. And the leader identified and said, "Hi, my name's so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic." And he said, could we go around the circle, please? And everybody identified themselves. And people started raising their hand, going, "Hi, my name's so-and-so, and I'm an alcoholic." And it came around to me, and I said, "My name's Fred, and I'm an alcoholic." And I had never once considered that I was an alcoholic, ever. In all the years that I drank, it never occurred to me. I thought drinking was the only thing that was keeping me going. I never considered I was an alcoholic. Alcoholics cannot stop drinking. I never tried to stop drinking. Alcoholics black out. I don't ever remember blacking out. You see, I thought blacking out was going to work one morning and waking up 3 weeks later in Philadelphia. I just seemed to lose consciousness somewhere after about 10 o'clock at night because nothing important was going on. But I went to the meeting and I raised my hand as an alcoholic, and that was on July 14th, 1981. And I haven't had a drink or a pill or a joint or anything like that since. I've talked about my son Daniel. When I was 5 years sober, I went out one day to visit my kids. One of the benefits of being sober, that I was able to reestablish contact with my children, and spent a day with both my kids, my son and my daughter. And it was a wonderful day, and we went over to a park that was across the street from my ex-house, where my ex-wife and my ex-dog and my ex-cat all live. And we spent an afternoon, just my two children and I, in the park, and we talked about everything. We talked about divorced parents, and we talked about missing each other, and we talked about alcoholism, and we talked about being the sister of a handicapped boy, and we just talked for hours and hours, which is amazing for a 12-year-old and an 8-year-old to be able to do. And at that time, a 30-some-odd-year-old to be able to enjoy that time together. And 2 weeks later, I got a call before I went to work that my son had died. And if you want to talk about a reason to drink, that would be it. I was in absolute shock. It was unexpected. The last time I had seen him, he was very, very healthy, other than being confined to a wheelchair. His attitude was wonderful. and he died. When I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I had lost a 10-year marriage. I had lost my children. I had no workable concept of God. I had no feeling of closeness to anybody. And through a lot of ups and downs and a lot of direction from people who sometimes still amaze me with their insight into my life, I have a God today that has carried me through everything. I have a God today that has given me the ability to work, given me the ability to love people, even given me a wife who's silly enough to think that I'm good for her. And we've been together close to 5 years now. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a new life. When I first came to AA, if I would have heard that, which I probably did, it wouldn't have registered. I did not believe there was a better. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me the one thing that I think every human being on the face of the earth strives for, which is freedom. The freedom of fear, the freedom of being isolated, the freedom to have a God in my life that I know actually cares. And it's something I couldn't find on my own. And the only price I've had to pay for it is to quit drinking and do what other people who care about me tell me to do. That's the only price. It seems to be a very small price for the freedoms that I've gotten. I am grateful to the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, the people. I am grateful for the people that put the program together originally, 50 some odd years ago. I'm grateful for the people in my life today because they always remind me that for today and on a daily basis, I will never have to drink again. I will never have to be alone again. And I will never be without God again.
Let me never let me fall from you. When others do, I will follow.
You've been listening to The Bottom Line, featuring Fred's story. Fred, thanks for embracing us with your pain. I know this wasn't easy for you to do. Thanks for sharing your experience, strength, and hope. This show is produced for Armed Forces Radio Worldwide. I'm Gary Thiemann. Until next time, God bless you, and share the message, won't you? This has been a GRT production.